Let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a trade where you knew, deep down, you should close it, but you didn't? The market moves against you. Your stop loss is right there. The plan is clear. The rules are simple. And yet, instead of cutting the loss, you hesitate. You watch. You hope. You tell yourself, maybe it will come back. Minutes pass. The loss grows. And now something inside your mind changes. The trade is no longer just a trade. It becomes personal. It becomes emotional. It becomes a battle between you and the market. But here is the truth most traders never want to admit. The problem is not the market. The problem is not the strategy. The problem is not even the loss itself. The real problem is what that loss means to you. Most traders believe they are afraid of losing money, but that is not the whole story. What they are actually afraid of is being wrong, because the moment you close a losing trade, your mind interprets it as a personal failure, and the human mind is designed to avoid pain. So instead of accepting a small loss, traders hold on. They move the stop, they add to the position, they wait, they hope, they pray. Not because it is logical, but because it feels emotionally safer than admitting the trade didn't work. Professional traders understand something that amateurs don't. Losses are not the enemy. Refusing to accept them is. You see, the market operates on probabilities. Every trade is simply one outcome in a long series of outcomes. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and that is perfectly normal. But the average trader cannot operate in probabilities because they are emotionally attached to being right. And as long as you need to be right, you will always struggle to cut your losses. Today, I want to show you why this happens, and how the shift in your mindset can change everything. Because the moment you truly accept losses as a normal part of the game, trading becomes something completely different. It becomes calm, it becomes disciplined, and most importantly, it becomes profitable. The real reason traders refuse to cut losses has very little to do with the market, the strategy, or even the amount of money involved. Most traders believe that their difficulty with cutting losses comes from fear of losing money. On the surface, that explanation seems logical. After all, nobody enjoys watching their account balance decrease. But if you look deeper into the psychology of trading, you begin to realize that money itself is not the real issue. The real issue is what the loss represents inside the trader's mind. Every trader enters the market with a belief about themselves. They believe they are intelligent enough to understand the charts. They believe they have studied enough to identify good setups. They believe the analysis should lead them to the right decision. So when they enter a trade, they are not just placing a position in the market. They are also placing a small piece of their identity into that decision. The moment the trade starts moving against them, something uncomfortable begins to happen internally. The market is not just disagreeing with their position, it is challenging their belief about their own competence. In that moment, the loss becomes more than a financial event. It becomes psychological evidence that their judgment might be wrong, and the human mind has a powerful tendency to avoid information that threatens its self-image. So instead of cutting the loss quickly, the trader begins to hesitate. They look for reasons to stay in the trade. They scan the chart for signals that support their position. They search for news that might confirm their belief. The mind becomes selective, filtering out anything that contradicts the original decision. This process happens so naturally and so quickly that most traders are not even aware it is happening. The trader tells themselves that the market just needs a little more time. They believe the move against them is temporary. They convince themselves that closing the trade right now would be premature. But underneath all of these rationalizations lies a deeper emotional motivation. The trader is trying to avoid the psychological pain of being wrong. Being wrong feels uncomfortable because most people are conditioned from a very young age to associate mistakes with failure. In school, the goal is to give the correct answer. In most professions, success is measured by accuracy and precision. When you make mistakes in those environments, you are often criticized or punished in some way. Over time, the mind develops a strong association between being wrong and experiencing emotional pain. Trading, however, operates under a completely different structure. In trading, being wrong is not an exception. It is a normal and unavoidable part of the process. No trader in the world can predict the market with certainty. Every trade carries an element of uncertainty. That means losses are not just possible. They are guaranteed to happen. But the average trader enters the market with the same mental framework they developed in everyday life. They expect that if they analyze the chart correctly, they should be right most of the time. When the market proves them wrong, the experience creates internal conflict. The mind struggles to reconcile the belief in its own correctness with the reality of the loss appearing on the screen. To reduce that conflict, the mind searches for a solution that allows the trader to avoid accepting the loss. Holding the trade longer seems like a reasonable compromise. If the market eventually comes back, the trader will not have to admit they were wrong. The pain will disappear, and the ego will remain intact. Hope becomes the trader's emotional defense mechanism. But hope has a dangerous side effect. It delays the decision that needs to be made. Every moment the trader stays in a losing trade without a valid reason increases the size of the loss. What began as a small and manageable risk slowly turns into something much larger. The trader watches the chart carefully, waiting for the market to turn around. At first, the loss might be small enough to ignore. Then it becomes noticeable. Eventually, it reaches a point where closing the trade would feel even more painful than before. The trader begins thinking about how much money they will lose if they exit now. This creates a psychological trap. The larger the loss becomes, the harder it is for the trader to accept it. Instead of cutting the trade, they hold on even tighter. They start thinking about recovering the loss with a single move. They tell themselves that if the market just moves a little bit in their favor, they will close the trade immediately. But the market does not care about their emotional comfort. It simply continues moving according to supply and demand. And as the market continues moving against the position, the trader's emotional state becomes more intense. Stress increases. Focus narrows. Rational thinking becomes more difficult. At this stage, the trader is no longer managing a position. They are reacting to emotional pressure. Professional traders experience losses just like everyone else, but they interpret those losses differently. When a professional enters a trade, they already know the exact point where they will exit if the market proves them wrong. That decision is made before the trade is placed. Because the decision has already been made, there is no emotional debate when the moment arrives. If the market reaches that level, the professional trader simply exits the trade. There is no hesitation because there is no internal conflict. The loss was already accepted before the trade even began. This difference in mindset is one of the most important distinctions between amateur traders and professional traders. Amateurs treat losses as unexpected failures. Professionals treat losses as expected outcomes within a probability-based system. Think about how a casino operates. A casino does not expect every spin of the roulette wheel to generate profit. Some spins will result in payouts to the players, but the casino understands the mathematical edge built into the game. Over a large number of spins, that edge guarantees profitability. A professional trader approaches the market with a similar mindset. They understand that each individual trade is simply one event within a long series of events. Some trades will win. Some trades will lose. What matters is not the outcome of any single trade, but the consistency of executing the strategy over time. When you truly accept this concept, the emotional resistance to cutting losses begins to disappear. Closing a losing trade no longer feels like an admission of failure. It feels like a normal part of the process. But reaching this level of acceptance requires a significant shift in how you think about trading. It requires you to separate your personal identity from the outcome of your trades. The market is not judging your intelligence, your discipline, or your worth as a person. It is simply moving. Your job as a trader is not to prove that you are right. Your job is to manage risk and execute your edge with consistency. Once you understand this, something powerful begins to happen. The emotional charge around losses starts to weaken. Instead of feeling threatened by a losing trade, you begin to view it as information. The market is simply telling you that this particular idea did not work. That information allows you to move on to the next opportunity without carrying emotional baggage from the previous trade. The irony is that traders often believe cutting losses quickly will make them lose more money. In reality, the opposite is true. The traders who struggle the most financially are usually the ones who refuse to accept small losses. By holding on to losing trades, they allow small problems to grow into large ones. Professional traders, on the other hand, are comfortable taking small losses because they understand the bigger picture. Each small loss protects their capital and keeps them in the game. And staying in the game is the only way to allow their edge to produce profits over time. So the real reason traders refuse to cut losses is not a lack of knowledge. Most traders already know they should exit losing trades quickly. The real challenge is psychological. It is the deeply ingrained desire to avoid being wrong and the emotional discomfort that comes with admitting a mistake. Until a trader confronts that internal resistance, no strategy, indicator, or system will solve the problem. The charts can be perfect, the analysis can be accurate, but if the trader cannot accept the emotional reality of losses, they will continue repeating the same destructive behavior. The moment you understand that losses are not personal, everything changes. The market stops feeling like an enemy. Trading stops feeling like a constant emotional battle. And cutting a loss becomes just another routine decision, no different from entering a trade in the first place. That shift in perspective is what separates traders who survive from traders who disappear. The mindset shift that makes cutting losses easy does not come from learning a new indicator, discovering a better strategy, or finding a perfect entry point in the market. It comes from changing the way you interpret what a loss actually means. Most traders approach the market believing that every trade should work if their analysis is good enough. They study charts, learn patterns, watch countless hours of market videos, and eventually begin to believe that if they just try hard enough, they can avoid losses almost completely. This belief feels logical at first, but it creates a dangerous psychological trap. When a trader believes that a good analysis should lead to a winning trade, every losing trade starts to feel like proof that something went wrong. The mind immediately searches for explanations. Maybe the entry was too early. Maybe the stop loss was too tight. Maybe the market makers manipulated the move. The trader becomes obsessed with finding a reason why the trade failed, because deep down, they still believe that losses are not supposed to happen. This belief makes it extremely difficult to close a losing position. The trader feels as if they are giving up too soon, as if they are abandoning an idea that should eventually work if they just hold on a little longer. The mindset shift begins the moment a trader truly understands that the market is not designed to validate their analysis. The market does not reward effort, intelligence, or hard work. It simply moves based on the constant interaction between buyers and sellers. Every time you place a trade, you are participating in a complex environment where thousands or even millions of other participants are acting based on their own beliefs, strategies, and emotional states. In such an environment, certainty does not exist. There is only probability. Once you begin to see trading as a probability game rather than a prediction game, the emotional weight attached to each trade starts to disappear. A probability-based mindset accepts that even the best setups will fail sometimes. It accepts that a perfectly valid trade can still produce a loss. This acceptance removes the need to defend every position you take in the market. Instead of trying to prove that you are right, you simply allow the probabilities of your system to play out over time. Professional traders understand that no single trade has the power to define their success or failure. They view each trade as one small event in a long series of events. Imagine flipping a coin where you have a slight mathematical advantage over time. Some flips will produce losses even though the long-term outcome is profitable. If you emotionally react to each individual flip, you will never allow the advantage to reveal itself. Trading works the same way. The edge exists across many trades, not within any single one. When you adopt this perspective, cutting losses becomes much easier because the outcome of one trade no longer feels important. A loss does not mean you made a mistake. It simply means that this particular trade fell on the losing side of the probability distribution. Once you accept this reality, the need to hold on and hope disappears. Hope is replaced by discipline, and discipline is built on the understanding that your job is not to avoid losses, but to control them. Another important part of this mindset shift involves redefining what success in trading actually means. Most beginners believe success means winning trades. They measure their performance by how often they are right. If they win a trade, they feel confident and capable. If they lose a trade, they feel frustrated or disappointed. This emotional roller coaster makes it very difficult to maintain consistency because their self-confidence rises and falls with every outcome. Professional traders measure success differently. They define success as following their process. If they enter a trade according to their plan, manage the risk correctly, and exit according to their rules, the trade is considered successful, regardless of whether it results in a profit or a loss. This shift removes the emotional pressure attached to being right. The focus moves away from outcomes and toward execution. Execution is something you can control. The market's reaction to your trade is not. When your focus is on execution, cutting losses becomes a natural part of the process. If your trading plan says that you should exit the trade when a certain price level is reached, then exiting at that level is simply the completion of the plan. There is no internal debate about whether the market might turn around or whether you should give the trade more time. The decision was already made before the trade began. This is one of the most powerful habits professional traders develop. They make their most important decisions before they are emotionally involved in the trade. When you are calm and objective, you can clearly define where your trade idea becomes invalid. That level becomes your stop loss. Once the trade is active, your only job is to follow the decision you already made. Most traders struggle with this because they wait until the trade is losing before deciding what to do. At that point, emotions are already influencing their thinking. Fear begins to interfere with logic. The trader becomes tempted to move the stop loss or ignore it completely. The result is that small losses slowly grow into large losses that damage both the trading account and the trader's confidence. The mindset shift eliminates this problem by treating the stop loss as a normal and expected part of every trade. It is not a punishment. It is not a sign that the trader failed. It is simply the point where the market proves that the original idea is no longer valid. When that point is reached, the trade ends. Nothing more needs to be analyzed or debated. This approach also protects something far more important than money. It protects emotional stability. Large losses create intense emotional reactions that can affect future decisions. A trader who experiences a painful loss often tries to recover the money quickly by taking impulsive trades. This behavior leads to a cycle of frustration and inconsistency that is extremely difficult to escape. Small losses, on the other hand, are easy to accept. They do not create the same emotional damage. When losses remain small and controlled, the trader can maintain a clear and focused mindset. This mental clarity is essential for recognizing new opportunities in the market and executing them with confidence. Over time, something interesting begins to happen when you consistently cut losses without hesitation. Your relationship with the market changes. Instead of feeling anxious every time a trade moves against you, you remain calm because you already know exactly what will happen if the market reaches your stop level. The uncertainty disappears because the risk has been defined and accepted in advance. This calm state of mind allows you to observe the market more objectively. You stop reacting emotionally to every price movement and begin to see the bigger picture. Trading becomes less about trying to control the market and more about responding intelligently to what the market is doing. The traders who reach this level of understanding often describe trading as becoming almost effortless, not because the market becomes predictable, but because they are no longer fighting against uncertainty. They accept it as part of the environment in which they operate. Once uncertainty is accepted, losses lose their emotional power. Cutting a losing trade becomes no different than following any other rule in your strategy. It is simply another action that supports the long-term survival and profitability of your trading business. And that is perhaps the most important mindset shift of all. Trading is not a test of your intelligence or your ability to predict the future. It is a business built on risk management and probability. Businesses experience expenses as part of their normal operation. For a trader, losses are those expenses. They are the cost of participating in the market and accessing the opportunities it provides. When you begin to see losses as business expenses rather than personal failures, the emotional resistance to cutting them disappears. You no longer feel the need to defend every trade or prove that your analysis was correct. You simply manage risk, follow your plan, and allow the probabilities of your edge to work over time. That is the mindset that makes cutting losses easy. It is not about becoming fearless or emotionally detached from money. It is about understanding the true nature of trading and aligning your thinking with the reality of how markets operate. Once that alignment happens, the behavior that once felt difficult becomes completely natural. In the end, the ability to cut losses has nothing to do with intelligence, strategy, or experience. It has everything to do with mindset. The moment you stop needing every trade to be right, you free yourself from the emotional trap that keeps most traders stuck. Losses are not failures. They are simply part of the probability game that every trader must play. When you accept this truth, cutting a losing trade becomes easy. You protect your capital, protect your mindset, and stay in the game long enough for your edge to finally work in your favor.